Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Tuesday, July 7th, 2020, 9:40 a.m. Central. Beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Grymvald, my setting. Since 1974. It's a world building day. I've been tied up, I'm afraid, with some appointments this morning and also have some further appointments to deal with very soon, so I'm not going to be able to make this much of a long day today, I'm afraid. But I did want to do a show because I keep doing these and I don't want to miss a day. I am checking right now in the stream chat. See if anyone is in there. Looks like LexFire22 might be there. We will see. In any event, world building. World building in Grymvald, my own setting. Started off with a little dungeon with a village nearby, much like is suggested in all of the early works. The wilderness. You know, there's something neat. We could do that real quick. Let me drop that down and then open this up. And Games General, let's see. I wonder if we could have a look in the third OD&D book. Volume 3. Here we go. Let's bring this on in. Have a little look here. Here's some information. So this is specifically about creating a dungeon, not really world building in total. Good dungeon will have no less than a dozen levels down. Okay. Castle Greyhawk. Right on. There's some talk about how to populate it. Some talk about tricks and traps. Distribution of monsters and treasures. Roll a die for every room or space not already allocated. You want to do some wandering stuff. Unguarded treasures are possible. Let's see. I want to do this and then do that. Talks about moving into the underworld monsters. Levels on various ones, how to avoid them. Gives an example of refereeing. Dweller 8, how you doing? LexFire22, good to see you. Thanks for joining me. Sorry I was a little late this morning. Wilderness. Let's have a look at this here because this is interesting. So-called wilderness, however, really consists of unexplored lands, cities, and castles, not to mention the area immediately surrounding the castle, ruined or otherwise, which housed the dungeons. Okay, so consists of unexplored lands, cities, and castles. Unexplored by the players is what they mean. This is not wilderness, pristine wilderness untouched by human hands. This is in relation to the player character adventurers that it is unexplored. The referee must do several things in order to conduct wilderness adventure games. First, he must have a good ground level map of his of his dungeons, a map of the terrain immediately surrounding this, a final map of the town or village closest to the dungeon, where the adventurers will most likely base themselves. So there you go. That is the advice. That is how you get started in world building according to 1974 standards. Dungeon maps, terrain surrounding the dungeon, a map of a town or village closest to the dungeons, and there you go. They go on to say, Blackmore is a village of small size, a one-horse town, while Greyhawk is a large city. Both have maps with streets and buildings indicated, and the players can have town adventures roaming around the bazaars, inns, taverns, shops, temples, and so on. Venture into the Thieves' Quarter only at your own risk. The terrain beyond the immediate surroundings of the dungeon area should be unknown to all but the referee. Offhand adventures in the wilderness are made on the outdoor survival playing board. Explained below. If you're not familiar with that, in the early days of D&D, there was a game called Outdoor Survival. You can still pick it up in various places. Usually if it's not in pristine shape, you're looking at maybe $10, $20, I don't know. In any event, the whole object of that game was to get plunked down into the wilderness and to find a way to survive, get to a camp, get to an extraction point. There were, a dozen or more scenarios of different types of situation. There were weather charts. There were all sorts of charts you'd roll random events and whatnot on, and then you would try to just survive. It's literally called Outdoor Survival. It was like going camping with a pocket knife and some cord, and trying not to die. In any event, there were all sorts of terrains depicted on this outdoor survival board. In fact, if you just do a Google search by outdoor survival, you would, let me see. I'm going to do board game. That'll bring it up. Here we go. Let's just bring this over here. So this is the board here. Right? Mountains, forests, there's some desert areas, swamp. No really big water areas. There's a river that runs through it. In any event, there are a number of places marked on here where there are, camps. Are they camps, really? Let's have a look. Little ponds, water. There are places where there are potential hunting grounds, right? And this is it in a nutshell. This was the game. Board Game Geek tells us that this was originally published in 1972. So, 4.7 rating. Horrible rating. Not a good game. Here are some of the charts that you get to keep track of your water and your food and your life level, your condition. Notice this, it's like the opposite of an evolution chart. You basically become more and more decrepit the longer you survive. There are ways of keeping your water and food up, and once you pass these check boxes without filling, without having the requisite food or water, Then you pop down these life levels and become weaker and weaker till you're no more than a crawling O on the ground. How horribly exciting. In any event, like I say, there are other tables that were involved in how you run the game. Let's see if we can find something here. Here are the terrain tables. These are pretty useful for glancing at. Map board movement charts. So they talk about what it costs movement wise to, is it to leave a square or to enter a square? Different games had different movement points it took to enter. Okay, this is a game where you get charged for entering, not for leaving. Quick look at some of the other stuff that was included. There were charts for what to do when you get lost for hunting. Of course, you have all the various chits involved to keep track during the game of your health and your food and your water. And then there was a whole booklet. There was the rules of play, but there's a whole booklet of scenarios. Anyway, when it comes to D&D, the idea was if you just needed a random outdoor map and you didn't want to make a map, this was generic enough that it could stand in for a map for an RPG for however long you needed it. I mean, you could make this your world and plunk down cities and towns here on this map and make this your actual game world. I know more than a few people over the years have just done just that. Other people have taken other parts of the world and made maps or absconded maps from other games. Here's a Mythic Europe one, right? Plunk down their own hexes over top of it. Certainly that's something you can do. You can move it differently. Keep track of road movement. That can obviously be a lot faster. Keep track of major roads between towns and whatnot. So you can put a map together like this. And if people mainly stay on the roads, they can move a lot faster. So it's good to be able to keep track of that. You might want a map that just points out the various tribes that control various areas, like this year 150 map of southern Britain, according to Ptolemy, who was keeping track in the wake of Caesar's initial foray. Then there were others who went in, and of course they would occasionally be able to capture some people and get some information. Sooner or later, they knew where things were. And the various tribes are all denoted on this from that time. It's a good thing. It's useful for sure. This is just a blow up of that map. It essentially details what was happening in Wales at that time. Rivers and lakes of Wales, there's a good one to have. So if you want to get pretty detailed in multiple ways, taking your cue from a series of maps like this, major geographical features, roads, tribes, or peoples, nations, however, at what level of civilization you're denoting it. Those are good things to add on. You want to just do major rivers? There you go. We're naming the major rivers. We're drawing in all the minor ones, or the next size down from major, right? So there you go. These are useful map features. Here's another map from later, 540. Right? Quite a bit different. You have some kingdoms named. Right? These are controlled by the Saxons. Notice the use of color here to make sure that these tribes are set aside or show their allegiances to one another, right? Part of a people. Tribes are a deeper division. Angles, right? Jutes. There you go. Brythons. Britons, yeah. They run up the whole side over there. And then these green are some more Irish that I've... You know, it's worth noting, in all the histories I've read, and various historical fictions, which count for less, but clearly, when people talk about the quote-unquote Viking threat to England, which was a very real thing and lasted for hundreds of years, near 1,000 years, right, from its initial onward to occupation and continued occupation before you could claim that those that had settled are integrated to such an extent that they're no longer outsiders settled in, but rather part of the landscape, part of the groups that lived there. So aside from the Vikings, every other group you see depicted on this map here are groups that have slipped in at one point or another from either Scandinavia or what has become Europe's mainland continent, or from other isles, right? So these in green here have come over from Ireland proper as we know it today, and these other big islands, and certainly the Orkneys and Shetlands that are up north here, have their own peoples that sometimes would make headroads or headway into inroads into the mainland of the United Kingdom, the main island, we should say, the Wales, what is Wales, England, Scotland, United Kingdom, I guess, huh? So, good to do this. Good to throw these names in there. Good to take some time giving them some basis in being similar to one another. Obviously, where that might be most pronounced is on the left-hand side of this map, where there's a preponderance of Y's and W's used in the names of the places that are in modern-day Wales. The X's in those tied to the Saxons, right? And East Anglia, Middle Anglians, South Anglians, right? You can have a number of places that are named very closely like that with directional dividers. Perhaps that land was divided up by 3 sons of a king who passed away. I'm not saying necessarily what's happened anywhere on this map. I'm saying that as a way of taking one larger location and divvying it up while keeping a similar name amongst the three that become the progeny of that nation. So, where are we at? We're about 20 minutes in. We're about 10 o'clock. Like I said, I got to kind of keep this short today. I've got some appointments to deal with, and it's part of what caused me to enter late. So, that was just some general world building discussion. These are the kind of things I definitely kept in mind as I was putting together my own Grymvald campaign and creating it back in the day, starting in 1974, and then expanding it. So these are things worth considering, even if you've considered them before, kind of in a new. Let's say you've thrown something together. Let's say you've already got a world. Go back and think of it as if you were building it from scratch with these kind of things in mind, and see how well it sort of follows the logic of world building that is essentially how in meat space in the real world we've gotten from A to B, and see if there's good solid naming conventions from area to area. See if it makes sense that there were migrations in certain patterns. And certainly look up migratory maps for different peoples in a Google image search, and you'll see all sorts of waves of people that have moved around continents in sometimes surprising ways, and but often in predictable ways that follow geographic lines, that follow previous patterns of migration, that follow rivers and mountains, that often take the paths of least resistance. Often people migrate because they're driven from where they were, and they're looking for somewhere safe and comfortable to settle, to farm, to herd, to gather, to grow, to hunt, to put down roots and have children and continue in a life that they've grown accustomed to. So think of those things as you're populating and world building, and decide on a starting point and consider how much of a history you want to create before you're at ground zero for whatever campaign you're going to run. Do you want to do from cavemen on up through 1450 AD? Or something similar, something that's parallel to something like that? Sure, it's not a bad idea. So look at the maps that exist in the real world, create your own map, and then make those, create those parallels in your own world, and make it work. Have civilizations rise and fall and leave behind those ruins that you know are going to want to be explored by adventurers. And do all of that with the idea of, with the thinking, with the mindset that it's going to be explored by player characters, run by players. So keep in mind that you don't want to do a lot of navel gazing. As interesting as that can be, creating a world and doing whole lineage charts that you've already resolved will never see the light of day just for your own edification. It can be fun, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do if you're going to be writing novels or thinking long term, but try to remember, if you're doing this for a game, get it ready for a game as soon as you can, and have most of your efforts be in service of that. There's a world building tip that's worth the price of admission, which was free. Well, I want to thank everybody for popping in today. Sorry we got a little bit of a late start. Like I said, I think we've covered quite a bit of ground there despite that. Don't forget, we'll be looking later this week at some of the components of the old school zine we're putting together, including some adventure design tomorrow or Friday. I don't know, one of the two. Also, rest of the schedule, let's see, Grymvald discussion. Yeah, we can do some of that tomorrow then. We'll also do it on Friday. So let's work toward getting that a lot closer to finish then. Crafting Painting Thursday, Saturday cartoon, I think 6th Conan the Adventure Animated Series episode on Saturday. Rules Retrospective will be continuing with the classes, looking at first edition fighters. Weekly news and giveaway. Thanks again following the channel. Thanks for chiming in on the chat when you're here. Appreciate it very much. If you're catching up with this on YouTube, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the channel. That gives you the notifications for when a new one is uploaded, which is always a useful thing. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment if there's something you'd like to say about the show that you feel be good constructive criticism, or even if it's close. We'll weed it out on our end and figure out what to do with it. So now that you're all excited to rush off to eBay and get yourself a outdoor survival map so you can run random adventures in wilderness using the tables from the original booklets or first edition even, then that'll be fun. Let me know how that goes too, because those are the kind of comments, anecdotal though they might be, are fascinating for people to read because it's more fuel for the fire. It's good info to have if you're running a game. It's good to have lots of info from other people that have run games prior to you. And those are the kind of things that can make your game so much better. I know it's the old, what's the DM equivalent of tell me about your character, right? Sometimes we worry about that. But tell me about your campaign world. There's nothing wrong with that. So you do it for me, and know that when you join me here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, a lot of what you'll be hearing is me telling you about my campaign world. And isn't that peachy? That makes it fun. All right. We've done our bit here. We've filled out the better part of a half an hour. We want to thank Inkdweller 8 and Lexfire 22 in particular for having stopped in earlier. And what can I say? Beat the heat. Stay cool out there. If you're going out places, keep your distance. Wear your masks. What's it gonna hurt? I'll tell you what. If it turns out it was wrong to wear masks, you wore a mask, big deal. If it turns out it was right and you didn't, that's not going to be a good turnout. Thanks, everybody. Bye.